This is Orange Nation Overtime with Steve Infante and Paulie Sibilia.
Welcome into Orange Nation Overtime alongside Paulie Sibilia. I am Steve Infante. It's been a few days. Been almost a week since we've last done one of these, Paulie.
Yeah,
how was your Thanksgiving?
Great. I spent it alone. How was your holiday, Steve?
It was fine.
Yeah, it was nice.
It was a nice break from talking sports. And last week was a rough week for Syracuse University athletics. You laid it out at the top of our Orange Nation radio show today that you think this might be the worst week that Syracuse University has had from a sports perspective in a very long time.
In my lifetime that I can remember, at least since I've worked the games, it was bad. And I think you and I have are at different points of our tolerance of what's going on. Also,
yeah. If you didn't listen to the show today, Paulie said something early on that I took issue with it when you said it's hard to defend the product of the football team and basketball team right now. And the football team, I get it, and we're going to talk Notre Dame game, and we'll talk BC and the way the season ended. But the product for the basketball team, I didn't think was bad in Las Vegas. It was one really bad half. But when I think of somebody say it's hard to defend the product, I kind of look at that as, well, the team's not very good. I think this team has the potential to be good. They had one half of basketball that went sideways, and yes, they finished 0-3, but I think a lot of teams would finish 0-3 against Houston and Kansas and Iowa State.
Yeah, but I am also at the point where this is year 3, and you've got to start winning these games. You got another shot tomorrow, but you got to start winning these games.
Yeah, and as for that shot tomorrow, I did reach out to an SU spokesperson before our show today to check on the status of Donnie Freeman. Remember, he was ruled out in Vegas. They said he would be reevaluated when the team returned to Syracuse. We've been told that Donnie Freeman will not be available to play against Tennessee. I think that was the assumption all along. But the timing of this, not only is it bad luck, Paulie, that Donnie Freeman got hurt again and that he's out again, the timing could not be any worse. Right before the 4 most important games, certainly the non-conference schedule,
right,
but arguably the 4 most important games of the season, because this kind of sets the tone for what your resume looks like going into the ACC.
And we were trying to decide whether Red has been snake bitten or not the past 2 years. He hasn't had Donnie and JJ on the court together very much at all.
Yeah, one game last year from December 1st.
One full game this year, right?
Yeah, well, JJ was hurt early. Yeah. I mean, he started the first game, but you can't really count those first 3.
Yeah.
And, it's been 2 games. It's been remarkable that they have not been completely healthy, and so that's been a bad break for Red. I think that the scheduling this year has been a bad break. They lose the St. Joseph's game at a neutral site. They end up getting that as a home game, and then that third game in Vegas, the committee did not go by, the formula that they had set out there. Syracuse, my understanding, was supposed to play Maryland. Instead, they get Iowa State. And, Iowa State right now, you look at the net rankings just released today, Iowa State is the toughest team they've played so far.
Yeah,
Iowa State's in the top 10.
Yeah, and the other thing that you got to think is that I don't think it affected the way they played the rest, but that loss to Houston mentally had to have, affected them a little bit. But you got to make free throws if you want to win games like that, and hopefully they could figure that part of the game out also.
Yeah, Syracuse statistically dead last in the country right now in free throw shooting percentage, and I don't think there's any way around it. It cost them that Houston game. If they make their free throws, even if they made
1 in regulation.
Yeah, I mean, just an average number of free throws instead of a bad number of free throws in that Houston game, they win it. They're 57% right now on the season. That is dead last in the country. It cost them the Houston game. I think it cost them a chance in the Kansas game to keep that one close at the end if they make their free throws. It's been a problem.
And I could be wrong. It felt like they were fouling William Kyle down the stretch of that Kansas game until they got into the double bonus.
Yeah, it seemed like it was like hack a Shaq with him.
And they were winning.
Yeah, he made 1 free throw. And it's, he's going to be a struggle at the line all season long. I think JJ, we've seen, is certainly struggling at the line. And guys that you wouldn't anticipate. Nathan George was almost an 80% free throw shooter last year at Georgia Tech. He's had his struggles. Kyan's had his struggles. Nate Kings has had his struggles. You wouldn't expect it from those guys. And so hopefully they can get their act together at the charity stripe because, that was a costly loss against Houston. And I'm with you. I think that the energy that they exerted in that game, not even physically, but just the mentally and emotionally and the intensity with which they played against Houston, that was tough to come back less than 24 hours later to try to match that intensity against Kansas, and they couldn't do it. Kansas won, and then we saw what happened against Iowa State. Just ran out of gas, it seemed like, in that second half against Iowa State, non-competitive down the stretch. And it turns a 1-point game at the half into a 31-point loss. And now as a result, Paulie, they're number 90 in the net right now.
We've been killing that tournament, Steve, too. And another thing that's got to change out there, 3 games in a row, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's tough. That is tough.
Like even the NCAA tournament doesn't do that. It's like you got to give people at least one day off in that tournament.
Yeah, and you'll see it in conference tournament times, certainly. They've got to play 4. You look at Jerry's run at the Big East tournament, that was 4 games in 4 days.
Yeah, but that's actually playing for something, and it's that early in the season, and it's,
Right.
Yeah, you can't do that early in the year.
Yeah, and as a result, again, SU's non-conference resume in a little bit of trouble at the moment. Their last chance at a quality non-conference win does come tomorrow against Tennessee, and again, they're not going to have Donnie Freeman for that game. We'll circle back into basketball here in a little bit when we get to our interview with Mike McAllister, but we did start Mike off on the show today talking football, and I know that you brought up the question earlier today, which loss was worse, the 70-7 loss to Notre Dame or being blown out at home by a 1-10 BC team?
I lean that way.
Yeah, so speak for yourself. I mean, explain.
Yeah, I know. I think it speaks for itself. Like Notre Dame's got the best running back in college football, maybe the best player in college football. They needed to win big in order to stay in the playoff hunt, and they just put it on Syracuse. BC has 1 win this year.
Yeah, Fordham.
Yeah,
it was Fordham.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like
1 win. Yeah,
it wasn't even a Power 4 opponent.
No, and then you think like. The ACC's a disaster. I don't want to even get into it, but they beat Fordham. Duke lost to UConn, and they're in the conference championship game. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, and if Duke beats Virginia in the ACC title game, ACC's probably getting shut out of any bids in the college football playoff. Which, again, if you had told me that before the season, I would no way that's going to happen. But here they are. All right, we should point out that On3 Sports was the first to report today that Fran Brown is letting go of 4 assistant coaches. Again, this according to the report: special teams coordinator Ricky Brumfield, offensive line coach Dale Williams, defensive backs coach Joe Schaefer, and then co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach Robert Wright, all being let go by Fran Brown. And we had Mike McAllister on from CuseNation.com today, as we do every Monday. We started him off by asking him about these 4 coaches who have been let go, according to this report, and his thoughts on that. Let's hear from Mike McAllister.
I wasn't surprised by 3 of them. I think anytime your defense finishes 128th in the country in scoring, then there's going to be significant changes. So basically, almost anyone on that side of the ball was up for potential parting of ways, so to speak. I was a little bit surprised with Brumfield because I thought the special teams took a significant step forward this year. I thought they were a lot better than what they were last year. Doesn't mean they were great. Doesn't mean that there weren't some philosophical situations that there could have been behind the scenes that we weren't aware of. But certainly I thought the product on the field was better than what it was a year ago.
All right, let's talk about what happened on Saturday against Boston College. And when we did the pregame show, we talked about our keys to the game. And you said one of the biggest keys was who wants to still be playing football right now, and maybe who wants to play more, BC or Syracuse. And it felt like in that second half, and I said this to Paulie earlier in the show, it felt like in the second half only one team wanted to still be playing football, and that was Boston College. What do you take away? What do you make of that performance on Saturday?
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. Even throughout the entire first half, things weren't going great for Syracuse, but at least there was a change in terms of the game plan, right? Their approach and having Villari under center a bit more and sort of modifying, being a run-focused attack. And it had some success. They controlled the ball. They controlled time of possession, got into the red zone a couple of times and got some points on the board. And the defense was holding up pretty well. And then it felt like after halftime, they were just kind of like, all right, time for the offseason. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened. It's hard for me. I'm not out there and I'm not on the sideline. I don't see, hear the conversations or hear what the players are saying and all that type of stuff. And it's without a lot of that knowledge, it's hard for me to question effort, but that's certainly the way it looked for stretches in that game. I think some of the callers who have called in earlier have said similar things, that it just looked like the defense in the second half basically quit. Bond was basically open every single play, and then the more that happens, the more the running game for Boston College seemed to have success, and it just snowballed on Syracuse and got away from them.
I tend to think it was just a young team in the second half. I'm not, I've been negative. I find it hard to say that the effort wasn't there from these guys. I just don't think this is a group of kids that know better, maybe.
That's why I'm, it might look a certain way, but I'm not going to stand up here and say they stopped playing, they don't care, they weren't trying. I don't think I have all of the requisite information in order to make that claim, but I understand why some fans would think that based on what they saw. Bottom line is, it was an awful second half. It was sort of the icing on the cake of an awful 8-game stretch, and now we can get over all of that, go into the offseason, see what they do as far as changes to the coaching staff, the new guys that they bring in, and what they do in the transfer portal.
How much of this was just the loss of a quarterback? That it felt like that excuse was okay for a couple weeks, but then as it went on, how much of this was just the Angeli injury?
Well, I think everything else kind of can snowball on you once something like that happens, right? Just like look at the game against Clemson. I understand Clemson wasn't great, but they were still a 7-5 team. That's still a bowl game, a bowl team with a bunch of NFL players on it. And Syracuse pushed them around for 60 minutes at their place. They were enthusiastic. They had belief. They had confidence. Everything was clicking. And then that level of enthusiasm and confidence and everything else, even physicality, sort of seemed to go away as the season went along. And I think losing the quarterback can have an effect on the rest of the team, just because if the guy that you're expecting to come in and replace Angeli doesn't pan out to what you thought he would be, and everything starts to snowball on you from that side of things, the defense knows the offense isn't going to do much, and that our only chance to win is we basically have to shut other teams out. It's a lot of pressure to put on a defense, and so that can affect everything. And then as you go through the season, you realize some of the goals you had in place weren't going to happen, and then more and more young guys play. It can kind of get away from you a little bit. So even though it's one injury, that one injury can affect a lot of things. And they also were banged up in several other positions as well.
All right, Mike, let's look ahead to what's next and look ahead to, next season. And part of what's next, you alluded to it about the coaching changes. Do you think he's done with these 4 that were reported today, or do you think more are coming? And if so, who?
I don't have any knowledge that anyone else is coming, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't have specific names necessarily, but I guess whenever you have coaches that have their positions changed, their titles changed mid-season, those are kind of always guys I look at as potential guys that could be moving on one way or another, whether it's Syracuse deciding that they don't want to retain him anymore, or whether it's that coach deciding that they just want to go for another opportunity. Those are a couple of areas that I would keep an eye on. And then, you wonder if perhaps with the changes they made on the defensive side of the ball, are they going to look for someone with defensive coordinator, play calling, game planning experience, someone that's maybe a veteran in that type of position that can come in and maybe be a co-coordinator with an Elijah Robinson, and maybe that gives the defensive staff a boost from that perspective. So don't know specifically, but I'm certainly keeping an eye on some of those guys that had their positions or their titles changed during the season.
Another part of the offseason, of course, is signing a new freshman class, and the signing period, the early signing period, begins on Wednesday, runs through Friday. What are your thoughts on the early signing period, and what can Cuse fans expect with the big names like a Calvin Russell?
Yeah, I think the big names are going to stay and sign with Syracuse. The 2 questions that we kind of had going in were whether or not Cameron Wilson was going to end up flipping to Florida State potentially. They hosted him for an official visit a couple weeks ago, but he put out a report earlier towards the end of last week, over the weekend, that he shut down his recruitment and he's signing with Syracuse. So everything seems to be good as far as the big names go. But we know Terrell Grant, who's an athlete, 3-star prospect from Virginia, took an official visit to Virginia Tech over the weekend. So we're keeping an eye on him to see if he could potentially flip. And then Syracuse has sent out some offers to junior college prospects over the last few days. So we're going to keep an eye on them and see if they're potentially signing early, or if they could wait and decide they want to take visits and sign during the late period.
Any rumors you're hearing on the backup quarterback position?
Not yet. I think we need to kind of wait and see what happens with the transfer portal, because we don't know exactly who is going to be entering. The one name that's intriguing, now I haven't heard any direct connection to Syracuse, is, the name's escaping me, but he was at Western Carolina last year. And put up some monster numbers. He's in the transfer portal, and he went to Miami Northwestern High School, which is the same high school as Darius Johnson, who's currently on the roster. Calvin Russell, who you just mentioned, is the 5-star wide receiver that should be signing on Wednesday. Tadarius Hughes, who flipped from Florida State recently, 4-star defensive back. So Syracuse has a lot of ties to Miami Northwestern High School, and he was the quarterback there when he played high school ball. So there's some connections there. I haven't heard any direct link that Syracuse is interested or that he'd be interested in Syracuse, but he's at least a name at this juncture that I'm keeping an eye on.
Teron Dickens,
that's
38 touchdown passes, 2 picks.
Teron Dickens.
Yes.
Very Christmassy last name.
Yes, it is. That's true. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk some basketball, Mike, while we have you. And, we found out before the show, I think as expected, I don't think any of us were necessarily expecting Donnie Freeman to play, but we did get official word from an SU spokesperson that he will not be available tomorrow. Obviously, this is an enormous game for the Orange against Tennessee. How do they find a way to get this done without Donnie Freeman?
I think the same way that they were competitive against Houston. I think it starts on the defensive end and with the intensity there, and that can energize your team and get you going on the other end. Even in that game, Syracuse wasn't fantastic on the offensive end. They were okay, especially considering how good Houston is defensively. But what kept them in that game was their defense and how energetic they were on that end, how hard they played on that end for all 40 minutes. That's the type of effort you're going to need against Tennessee if you want to pull off the upset at home and get yourself back on the right side of things as far as the net rankings and the quad 1 wins and, getting the fan base to believe that what you saw against Houston is what this team is, and that they're going to get some meaningful wins this season and be back playing in March Madness.
What do you make of that trip to Vegas? Obviously, it ended with a bad taste in everybody's mouth with that poor second half against Iowa State. I guess, how do you look at it, from the outside looking in? Do you look at it as, well, it was 0-3, so it was a disaster? Do you look at it as they have some things they can build on, or maybe a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. It feels like if they had kept that game against Iowa State close and still lost, I think you could probably take more positives away than negatives. The problem is, because of how that got away, that hurt them so much in terms of the analytics and the net rankings and the Ken Palms and all of that. It sort of got rid of all of the goodwill that they had built up from the game against Houston when they were expected to lose but performed well above what all of the analytics were predicting. The fact that they let that get away from them the way that it did in the second half against Iowa State, I think the net result in terms of analytics and nets and all that type of stuff is negative for Syracuse right now. But I think if you take a step back and you kind of disregard that second half, for 5 of the 6 halves, they played pretty good basketball. They were right there with 3 highly regarded teams. And I think you can take positives away from that. But as much as you can take positives away from those things, at some point you got to start winning games, and not just winning games against the Delaware States, but you got to start winning games like when you have a Tennessee coming to your place, or you start getting into conference play and you've got that stretch the last 8 to 10 games or whatever it is where it seems like every team is inside of the top 60 in the net rankings right now. You got to win your share of those games if you want to make the committee look at you as a serious NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, Steve, Syracuse in the moral victory is 2.5 in the net rankings. Quad 1, 2.5 moral victories. Hey, Mike, I got to ask you, everybody's been asking what's going on in the background there? A fountain in your living room?
Oh, no, it's a fish tank.
Oh,
It's a
fish tank.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most logical.
That did not even cross my
Okay.
mind. I thought it was one of those Zen Zen
No,
things.
I'm not
saltwater,
not a Zen fountain guy.
saltwater or freshwater?
Freshwater.
All right. Yeah, I made the mistake of doing saltwater for like years. That was the most expensive hobby I ever had.
Fish tank was the first thing that popped into my head. I figured that's what it was. Mike, great stuff as always, and thank you for your last answer there, because that's essentially what I've been saying for the last half hour, and Paulie was angry at me. So
I'm angry at him too, but I like him.
Mike, be well. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Again, that's Mike McAllister. He joins us at 12:30 every Monday on our Orange Nation radio show. And you look at year one under Fran Brown, Paulie, I don't think it could have gone much better. Year two probably couldn't have gone much worse given the injury to Steve Angeli. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And, year three all of a sudden becomes a very big season for Fran Brown and the SU football program.
Yeah, and I don't know how big of a build you need. I think they will be better next year. You've got a great quarterback coming back. You got to do good in the portal. You got to get people that are ready to play, because I think the relying on the freshman class from this year to be that markedly better next year is a tall task. You got to let those guys develop. Their junior years, I could see it happen, but you got to win in the portal. You got to have a backup quarterback, and even with Angeli playing the way he was, you can't take away from the fact that they were the receivers that good, and then they just couldn't get him the ball at all, or was it Angeli? Don't forget they were back-to-back Moss catches for Angeli's passes too. So was it?
Steve Angeli was very good, and I think that the offense is set up in such a way that they need a prolific passer to succeed. And they had one last year, Kyle McCord. They had one at the beginning of this year in Steve Angeli, and then he was gone. And you thought that, okay, well, Ricky Collins, he's here from LSU. He couldn't do the job. And unfortunately, that happens sometimes when a highly touted recruit comes in and maybe isn't what you thought he was. In this case, it was a transfer from a major, Power 4 program that came in and just wasn't as good as you thought he was going to be. I threw out this stat earlier today. I'm going to repeat it now. Steve Angeli finished, again, he played 3.5 games. He finished with 1,317 yards passing and 10 touchdowns. Ricky Collins, Joe Filardi, and Luke Carney did not, between the three of them, did not match that total in yards or touchdowns the rest of the season. And they played 8.5 games.
They probably had a lot more interceptions than him also.
Collins threw 10 himself. Angeli had 2 interceptions. Collins had 10 interceptions. Joe Filardi had 3. 13 interceptions in those 8 games. Again, the turnovers were a problem. Steve Angeli, I think, is certainly a big reason. He's at the top of the list why this season went south, because I do think that it impacted the defense. The defense had several games where they played well in the first half, kept it close, and then got tired, worn down. Their spirit was broken, whatever the case may be, and the opponent just laid it on them in the second half, and we saw it in the BC game. It was a close game at halftime. Defense did its job. Second half, defense didn't do its job.
BC shouldn't be able to lay it on anyone.
No, I agree.
Steve, I always tell stories on our radio show that I was a hoodlum and a troublemaker as a kid.
Yes,
Want to hear a wholesome story?
I would love to.
I used to get up prior to the school bus in the morning and watch Mighty Mouse. Did you know Mighty Mouse, Steve? Do you know what his famous saying is?
You're going to have to remind me. I did watch it myself, too.
Here I come to save the day.
That's right.
Do you know what
Mighty Mouse is on the way.
Yes, you know what his original name was? Super Mouse. He was created as a parody of Superman.
Huh.
I always tie him with Heckle and Jekyll, too, because it was the Tom. I would listen. What was the show? It was the Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll in the morning before I would get on the school bus.
I'm going to take your word for it. I don't remember that far back. I remember watching. I don't. What was Heckle and Jekyll? What were
They're like magpies or crows. Or
I don't think I ever watched that show, but I did watch Mighty Mouse. I remember that. That's
Mighty Mouse. I think.
Go.
Yeah, I would watch the originals, like the old ones. I think Mighty Mouse came back in the late 70s, early 80s. So you might have been watching that one.
Yeah, that's about right for me, for my age group. Okay. Thank you, as always, for enlightening us with that. We do have to go. We're out of time. We appreciate you watching as we return from the holiday break. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. For Paulie, I'm Steve. We'll talk to you again tomorrow, everybody.
Download the WSYR Plus app on your TV to stream News Channel 9 for free. Just go to your smart TV, search WSYR Plus in the App Store, and download to start streaming today.